The story starts with a bunch of armored trucks speeding through this insanely foggy desert wasteland. Inside one of the transports, this heavily armed guard is laying down the law, straight up telling the passengers they better not leave their designated zones or do anything stupid that might tick off the inmates. The vibe is crazy tense until this blonde girl named Lara randomly breaks the ice, introducing herself as a science teacher. The dude next to her, Dante Kang, is rocking a suit and glasses and chimes, and that he is a science teacher too. Lara is totally surprised, and Dante figures science must be heavily requested, while this older, chubby ethics teacher laughs and admits his class was not popular at all. The rest of the crew jumps in, with a guy teaching music, a guy with a beard teaching arts, and a blonde dude handling math, making the ethics guy super relieved they are finally talking. Everyone is low-key freaking out about going to the world's biggest and scariest prison known as Fogland. The arts teacher starts dropping some wild lore about the international prison, scaring Lara. He tells them it was built right on top of a massive meteor crash site from 50 years ago. He mentions insane internet rumors about the facility actually holding aliens, along with satellite pictures showing weird creatures. He even brings up a researcher claiming Fogland literally opened the gates of hell, getting the ethics teacher super paranoid about teaching literal monsters. But Dante acts totally unbothered, basically calling them out for believing internet conspiracies. Dante argues that the inmates are just regular humans who ended up in a bad spot because they lacked proper education, making the ethics guy question if he is even scared. The arts guy glares and thinks Dante is totally full of himself. Before they can argue more, the radio crackles, warning them they are 5 minutes away from Fogland. The intercom announces the opening of the first gate. Dante gazes out at the United World's most notorious prison, mentally locking in for the inmate education project. They roll up to this massive facility covered in crazy, thick fog, and the intercom immediately barks orders about no filming and turning over personal belongings. The arts guy complains that the fog is so thick you could not get anything on camera anyway, while Dante is just amazed by how fitting the name Fogland really is. Armed guards start heavily escorting the teachers to their checkpoints, reminding them to follow instructions for their own safety. The arts guy whispers about how intimidating the security is as they get moving, while Dante tells himself to chill because they are just people. Dante walks into his classroom and gets a massive shock, because there is a literal ballistic glass wall separating his podium from the students' desks. A guard opens a heavy metal door behind Dante, warns him that the inmates are coming, and explicitly orders him not to leave the area under any circumstances. The guard just slams the door shut, leaving Dante alone in the quiet. Then, the metal doors on the other side of the glass open up, and chained inmates shuffle in through the fog. They look absolutely terrifying, with one massive beast, a skull-like face dude with a tattooed neck, and another guy who literally has a cone for a head. Dante is internally freaking out, wondering if they are even human, and realizing the ethics teacher might have been totally right about them being literal monsters. But Dante forces himself to lock in, repeatedly telling himself they are just uneducated people, and he tries to kick off the class like a pro. He attempts an icebreaker joke about them wanting to learn science to build a rocket and break out of prison. The joke lands with brutal awkwardness and dead silence until the hairy beast dude lets out a creepy laugh, making Dante feel the intense pressure. Dante quickly switches gears and pulls out some sweet potatoes, planning to teach these hardcore gang members a simple, wholesome lesson about living with nature. He gives this passionate speech comparing the inmates to the sweet potatoes because they both have infinite potential for growth. But the cone-headed dude takes it the wrong way and gets super triggered, violently slamming his desk because he thinks Dante just called him a sweet potato. Dante tries to backtrack in full panic mode, but then all the inmates start aggressively chomping down on the raw sweet potatoes like wild animals. Dante is totally confused and yells that they aren't supposed to eat them, wondering what is wrong with these guys. Suddenly, the skull-faced guy cuts the act and aggressively demands that Dante teach them how to actually make fog. Dante stammers, awkwardly asking if this is just a comeback to his rocket joke. That pushes the skull guy over the edge, and he lunges forward with insane speed, completely shattering the supposedly bulletproof glass with his bare head, while screaming about how he is not there to joke around. Dante completely loses his mind, screaming for the control room to help him because the glass is breaking. Instantly, an automated alarm blares a code red, and heavily armed tactical guards rush into the inmates' side of the room. Without hesitating, the guards are ordered to execute everyone, and they open fire, blasting the classroom with bullets. Dante is horrified, desperately begging them to stop the massacre because some of the inmates are blind, completely shattered by the sheer brutality of it all. But in the sickest plot twist ever, the inmates just shrug off the bullet and immediately start ripping the armed guards to shreds with sickening force. Dante watches the absolute bloodbath happen right in front of him, finally understanding that his new students are actually the terrifying monsters that rule the world's largest prison. Dante Kang wakes up to this sketchy creaking sound inside a super dark and busted up room. He looks over and spots an inmate crouching by a toilet, rocking an orange jumpsuit and a black bag over his head with these crazy, glowing blue eyes. Dante is totally shook and disoriented, asking where they are, and the masked dude casually replies that it is his home. Dante demands to know who the guy is and catches a glimpse of his inmate tag that reads 0-182. Realizing he is trapped with an actual prisoner, Dante starts having flashbacks to that insane riot where the inmates absolutely slaughtered all the heavily armed security guards. Sweating bullets, Dante asks if they are inside Fogland, and the masked guy just nods. Dante then asks if 0-182 is the one who dragged him there and why, but the dude literally just pulls out a sweet potato and asks Dante to teach him how to grow the thing. Dante is practically shaking with rage and fear, realizing these guys operate on zero logic. He completely snaps at 0-182, fuming that he got pulled into this lethal prison full of murderous psychos all over a stupid sweet potato. Convinced the inmate is hiding a weapon like a gun or a blade inside his concealed right hand, Dante decides to risk it all and completely tackles 0-182 to the ground. After pinning the surprisingly weak dude down, Dante yanks back the sleeve to disarm him, only to find out that 0-182 is actually missing his entire right arm. Trying to catch his breath, Dante goes off on 0-182 for putting him in such danger and flat out refuses to teach someone who has no brains. Acting super arrogant, Dante flexes that he is a law-abiding citizen who is definitely getting out, and he asks the inmate when the guards do their typical rounds. Convinced that the security team is actively searching for him, Dante throws open the cell door to make his grand escape. But instead of seeing a normal prison hallway, he looks out and is completely stunned by the sight of a massive, ruined, fog-drenched city. While Dante is screaming his lungs out in pure disbelief, 0-182 grabs him from behind, slaps a hand over his mouth, and warns him that he is being way too loud and that escaping is impossible. Dante is fuming, thinking to himself that he is way better than the absolute scum of the earth living in this place. Out of nowhere, this gigantic, hulking beast of an inmate rolls up, calls Dante a fatso, and just brutally punches him right in the face. Left bleeding and wrecked on the floor, Dante angrily blames 0-182 for his miserable situation and for losing his clothes. He yells at the masked guy for picking a fight with a literal monster when he is missing an arm. In response, 0-182 just silently stands up, unzips his orange jumpsuit, tosses it over to Dante, and commands him to put it on. Totally confused and terrified by the ripped one-armed inmate, Dante immediately apologizes and puts the prison suit on. Dante starts stressing that the rescue team will never be able to find him if he is wearing inmate gear, but 0-182 drops a massive reality check, brutally informing him that the top dogs called Shoulders already wiped out all the guards, and absolutely nobody is coming to save him. 0-182 explains that blending in is just how things work if you want to survive in Fogland. Then, 0-182 throws on a different beat-up uniform and announces it is time to eat, which actually gives Dante a little bit of false hope that he might be able to find some guards at mealtime. Meanwhile, in a totally different part of the prison, that crazy monster inmate that punched Dante is happily dancing around and flexing Dante's stolen suit. His vibe is instantly ruined when he is confronted by a massive, terrifying gang leader that goes by the name Shoulder. The monster guy tries to explain himself, saying he stole the fresh drip from a newcomer over in Tofu Village. The giant leader does not even care. He just brutally stabs the skull-faced inmate to death on the spot. Flashing this crazy, menacing smile, the leader pieces together exactly where Dante is hiding out and fully sets his sights on hunting down the teacher. Dante Kang is looking around and thinking that the prison looks more like a gray cement jungle than anything else. He notices how the dull color of the inmate's skin basically works like natural camouflage in the fog, and he gets totally freaked out by the haunting, hungry looks in their eyes. Dante is having a full-on panic attack internally, wondering what is wrong with all these people, and thinking he can't even tell if they are humans or actual beasts. As he walks with 0-182, he thinks to himself that this is definitely not what he pictured a prison looking like, and that Fogland actually just looks like a massive jungle. Dante turns to the masked inmate and nervously asks if they are actually sure they are inside the prison, because absolutely nothing seems right. 0-182 asks what he means, and Dante just goes off, pointing out that things are clearly completely out of place since everyone is just roaming free in a supposed prison. He points out that some inmates even look completely drunk, and then he looks up, completely horrified, asking if those things hanging up there are corpses because there is no way they are mannequins. Dante yells out that he thought the United World was supposed to be in charge of Fogland, but this place clearly isn't being managed at all. 0182 suddenly grabs Dante and tells him to shut up because he is speaking way too loudly. Dante tries to whisper back, but his mind is going a mile a minute, wondering why this guy would even tell him anything, and questioning if he is experiencing Stockholm Syndrome or something. He reminds himself that 0182 is literally a kidnapper with the same crazy eyes as the maniacs on the street, deciding that this guy is a threat too, and he must never trust anyone in here. They finally reach the Chow Hall, and when Dante sees the inmates actually forming a line for food, he gets a massive wave of relief. Thinking the mess hall doesn't look that bad, he peeks ahead and spots a uniform, realizing that means there is actually a prison guard here. Thinking he is finally saved, Dante tells himself to stay calm, noting that right now he just looks like another prisoner, so he has to show the guard how civilized he is to prove he isn't like the other inmates. When it is finally his turn, Dante politely addresses the guard, introducing himself as a teacher who was brought in to teach the inmates, and explaining that he got caught up in the riot and kidnapped by the masked man next to him. He tells the guard that if he isn't aware of the riot, he needs to contact his superiors immediately because they will definitely be looking for a teacher named Dante Kang, but the guard just stands there unresponsive. So Dante awkwardly says, "Sir?" before realizing the dude is literally drooling and has the same crazy dead eyes as the inmates, and the guard suddenly snaps and yells at Dante to move out of the line if he isn't hungry. Dante sits down with his food, completely dazed, wondering what is going on and what was up with that look the guy gave him. He thinks the guy seemed completely out of it, and wonders if he was even a guard to begin with, but he points out the guy is wearing the uniform and even has a badge. Dante starts spiraling, wondering where the other guards are, if anyone is even looking for him, and realizing that something is seriously wrong in this place. He decides he is completely screwed and is going to be trapped here for the rest of his life, just like the masked guy told him. Desperate, Dante turns to 0182 and brings up that he wanted to learn how to grow a sweet potato. Treating this as his absolute last resort, Dante offers to gladly teach him how, but in return, 0182 has to help him get out of there. Dante literally thinks he is taking advantage of the inmates' slow wits and asks if they have a deal. 0-182 just asks Dante if he takes him for a fool, pointing out that asking for all that over a lousy sweet potato is ridiculous. Dante immediately starts backpedaling, saying that isn't what he meant. He tries to explain that since 0-182 brought him there to learn about sweet potatoes, once he teaches him, there won't be any reason for Dante to stay, so he should be allowed to leave as payback for bringing him there in the first place. 0-182 just tells him straight up that if he wants to get out of there, he will have to become the supreme leader. Dante is totally baffled, asking what a supreme leader is and if he has to become the boss of the prison or something. 0-182 calls Dante a wimp and says he will never become one, to which Dante defensively replies that he never said he wanted to be one anyway. Dante asks if he has to become the boss just to contact someone outside the prison. 0182 tells him he either ascends or falls, and those are the only two ways out of Fogland. Dante is super confused and asks him to please explain what that means. 0182 shuts him down, saying that is enough questions. Dante gets super mad, saying that if 0182 doesn't want to help, he has no reason to stay with him and is getting out of this filthy place right now. Dante threatens 0182, saying he is going to regret this and will be punished by law once Dante gets out, trying to act tough by mentioning his family. He quickly gives up on that thought, realizing the guy will probably just rot in prison for the rest of his life anyway. Before Dante can actually leave, he hears someone yelling out for teacher and Mr. Kang. Thinking they are finally there to rescue him, Dante gets super hyped and starts yelling that he is over here. He introduces himself as Dante Kang, a 32-year-old public high school science teacher, and frantically waves his hands. Then, this absolute giant of a man with super long black hair steps up, and Dante is just completely in awe because he has never seen anyone so tall. All the other inmates start freaking out and murmuring that a shoulder is here. It is one of the 6 shoulders of Sector O, known as the Tower. Dante immediately gets terrifying flashbacks to how the Tower had completely slaughtered the guards earlier. The Tower stands there smiling like an absolute psycho, telling the dead guards that since they cheated by bringing rifles after searching the inmates, he doesn't have to play fair anymore. Then, the Tower literally pulls a massive sword straight out of his own throat, which is absolutely unbelievable, and Dante remembers how he killed the guards with just a single swing. Terrified, Dante asks why the Tower came looking for him. The Tower smiles and says it is simple. He just wants to continue the class. But then he drops the bomb that he doesn't care about sweet potatoes and tells Dante they should just skip straight to the main lesson, making fog. The tower holds out his hand to reveal 3 massive, glowing blue orbs, and all the other inmates start murmuring and freaking out. They point out that he actually has fog and totally geek out over how big the blue lumps are. The skull-faced guy glares at Dante, telling him to cut the childish nonsense and teach them how to actually make fog. Dante is completely terrified, staring at the blue lumps and stammering as he asks what those things even are. This totally triggers the tower, who leans in with this furious, terrifying grin and calls Dante a massive liar. The tower yells that since Dante is a science teacher, he is supposed to know everything, aggressively asking if teachers know everything there is to know. Dante screams back that he has literally never seen anything like that before, and that it does not even exist in the outside world. The tower just smirks, revealing that this is exactly why they took his class to learn about fog. He then drops the absolutely terrifying detail that all 6 of the prison's top bosses, the Shoulders, showed up specifically to capture him. Shrugging it off by saying it doesn't matter and that it is never too late to start over, the tower grabs one of the glowing orbs. He forces the cracking orb toward Dante, who is screaming about what the hell it is and yelling no. As the other inmates drool over it, Dante violently shoves the blue lump away, screaming that he absolutely does not want it. The orb clatters to the ground, and all the other inmates instantly dive for it in a massive dog pile. They start violently fighting each other, screaming that it belongs to them and throwing punches left and right. The tower just points at the chaos, telling Dante to look at how everyone wants fog because it is practically gold and a literal blessing from the gods. One old man manages to swallow the pieces, and the other inmates immediately swarm him, yelling at the bastard to spit it out. The old man just stands there completely motionless with a creepy smile as the other inmates literally start biting and ripping his body apart with their bare hands. The tower laughs at the pathetic Tofu Village bastards tearing each other up over a tiny piece of fog. He casually notes that today the old man will either go to heaven or gain incredible power if he somehow takes more fog. The tower turns back to Dante, grinning like an absolute maniac, and asks if he is feeling intrigued yet. That is just way too much for Dante, who immediately violently throws up all over the floor. Panting and completely sobbing, Dante cries out, asking himself why he ever came to this horrible place and begging to just go home. The tower demands to know what he just said about going home, and Dante frantically pleads for his life, swearing he has never seen that blue thing before and that he is not even a scientist. The tower yells that Dante is not fooling him, claiming he saw a show on TV where a science teacher makes top-tier drugs and sells them. Realizing the monster is literally talking about a TV show, Dante desperately screams that the character was supposed to be a chemistry professor, which is completely different. Dante admits he doesn't even have a PhD and is just a plain old high school teacher. Hearing this total confession, the masked guy, crying and telling Dante he is completely useless. Dante asks what that means, and the tower admit he only tracked Dante down first because he thought he could finally ascend and become the supreme leader. Turning completely hostile, the tower pulls out a sharp blade to attack Dante. Facing imminent death, Dante's life flashes before his eyes, throwing him into a memory of his family violently slamming his teaching certificate on the table and calling him a useless fool. They totally mocked his certificate as a joke, asking if teaching kids was all he wanted in life, and reminding him that literally no one in their family's history had ever achieved anything less than a doctorate degree. They accused him of leaving a massive stain on their proud family history, pointing out he couldn't even get a single paper published after 6 solid years. They roasted him, asking what made him think he could teach and insisting he was just using teaching as an excuse to run from his problems, while his older brother pleaded with his mom and dad to stop, insisting there was absolutely nothing wrong with being a teacher, and says at least Dante could make himself useful for once, and sarcastically imagining how tough it must be for him to fail his PhD for 6 straight years. Dante mentally noted how insane the pressure was, considering his father was a famous academic on TV, his mother was a law professor, and his older brother became the president of a psychology association at a super young age. He reflected that while he earned his share of respect as a teacher at school, at home, he was treated way worse than a stray animal. He then remembered the day he brought up the job offer from the International Penal Commission, explaining to his family that he would be teaching at a UN-run prison with really good pay. Someone chimed in, recognizing it as Fogland and calling it super cool because they heard it held straight-up freaks from all over the world, though Dante quickly defended the inmates as people, not freaks. His family questioned why he had to go work at a place like that when he already had a stable job at his school, asking what kind of elaborate scheme he was pulling this time. Dante proudly stated he just wanted to help people who never had the opportunity to learn, truly believing it was the most meaningful act an educator could do. His brother literally scoffed and intentionally spilled wine all over his own shirt just to mock Dante's noble resolve. His brother brutally told Dante he wasn't doing this out of commitment to his work, but was just making an impulsive decision out of a desperate need for validation. He accused Dante of refusing to acknowledge his PhD failure, tricking himself into a fake higher calling so he could put himself on a pedestal and brand himself as their equal. Basically, he said Dante was just trying to compensate for his incompetence by doing something edgy and different. When Dante angrily asked who his brother was to question his motives, his brother replied he was just looking out for his baby brother. His brother called the decision reckless bravado, saying Dante was just compensating for his massive sense of inferiority. His brother capped it off by saying that Dante's choice was the ultimate evidence of sheer stupidity. Back in the bloody reality of the prison, as the crazy inmate lunges at him with the blade, Dante cries, fully accepting that it is all true and that his brother was right in every single way. Dante admits to himself that he was an absolute fool and that his stupid choice is now definitely going to get him killed in this filthy, rotten hellhole. As the tower swings the weapon down, Dante bitterly accepts that the one truly lacking knowledge and education was none other than himself. Just as Tower was about to strike Dante, 0182 lands a savage downward kick right onto the giant's back, sending the huge guy crashing face first into the concrete with a sickening thud, and you can literally hear the guy's spine snapping and shattering into pieces. The giant tries to stand up with his eyes rolling back into his head, but he just sways and collapses completely, making all the other inmates freak out and yell that the Great Tower has officially fallen. The whole cell block goes wild, stomping and cheering because a new top dog just took the throne. This one weird dude with a bucket on his head walks up and asks the white-haired guy what his name is. But the white-haired dude just deadpans and says, "Teacher," and then he grabs Dante and tells him they need to bounce, leaving all the other inmates totally confused as he sprints away with Dante over his shoulder. Once they get to a safe spot, Dante drops to the floor tweaking out. He keeps touching his face and trying to process the fact that he actually survived that insane brawl. Then, 0182 gets up in Dante's face and demands to know if the whole sweet potato farming thing was a total scam. He asks why Dante even signed up to teach, if he could not make that glowing fog stuff, which makes Dante flinch super hard and start begging for his life like a total coward. But 0182 just looks confused and explains that he only went to the class registration because he heard they were handing out fresh clothes, flashing back to when he straight up cut a massive line of inmates just because he wanted to look sharp for the new teachers. Dante is super puzzled and asks why the guy bothered saving him then, but 0182 shuts him down instantly, saying he was not saving Dante at all. He explains he was just saving his own fresh clothes because Dante literally wet his pants all over them in terror earlier. Dante feels completely embarrassed about the pee incident while they are scrubbing the mess out of their jumpsuits at the sinks. Dante asks why 0182 kept his gross old jacket, and the dude just points at the 182 tag on it and claims it like a stubborn toddler, making Dante realize he is dealing with a guy who has the brain of a literal caveman. Later that night, Dante is starving in their dark cell and tries to sneak a tiny bite of 0182's raw sweet potato, but the white-haired dude drops from the top bunk like a ninja and threatens to end Dante's whole life if he touches his prized vegetable. Dante decides to play it smart and manipulates the guy by pointing out the carved numbers on the potato, telling him that he made the potato sick and it is going to die from browning, which makes 0182 panic so hard that he pulls a knife to demand a cure, leading Dante to trick him into believing they have to break out and head to the prison entrance gate just to get some sunlight for the plant. Meanwhile, back in the tower's hideout, the giant is groaning in pain while a chubby inmate bolts a heavy metal cage directly onto his shattered neck. The tower is whining about how his super strong spine got busted in one hit and swears he is going to hunt down the white-haired brat for revenge. Suddenly, this terrifyingly huge guy with tribal tattoos and a metal jaw guard steps out of the shadows. He mocks the tower for getting wrecked and asks for intel on where the teacher is hiding. And when the tower tries to act tough and claim he will still be the supreme leader, this new guy, who is apparently a top boss named the Hound, says he loves crushing overly ambitious losers, and he brutally smashes the tower's neck brace with a massive sledgehammer. The crazy bloody aftermath in the prison showing a bunch of defeated inmates scattered across the floor. Before that heavily tattooed dude, the Hound walks past them with his crew commanding them to head to the Tofu village, and they zoom off on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Dante and 0182 are totally dragging through the Fogland limbo, carrying these massive heavy black trash bags, with Dante huffing and puffing as he asks what's in the bag. Because it's heavy, and 0182 simply replies it's his, which makes Dante question why, and if it does have 182 written on it. Trying to make conversation, Dante asks, "By the way, what's his name?" And 0182 bluntly answers, "One arm." Dante thinks he's kidding and asks if it's a joke. And seriously, doesn't he have a name? but 0182 insists that's what people call him. Dante scoffs, telling him that's no way to call a person, and it's uncultured, so he'll just call him Mr. 182 then. Dante then interrogates him, asking why he wears a bag over his head, and if he's a thief or a robber, and how he ended up in Fogland. 0182 shocks him by revealing he was always there, making Dante stammer what he means, and if he's always been there. 0182 gets annoyed and turns to him and says, why so many questions, telling Dante he's a teacher, so he should know things. Dante points out teachers aren't omniscient, to which 0182 glares and snaps that he talks too much, and his voice is too loud, adding that it comes with the job, so he should shut up. Exhausted, Dante flops onto the ground with a thud and begs if they can take a break, because he's so hungry that he can hardly walk. 0182 turns around in confusion as Dante complains how far the gate is from there, because they've been walking for at least 2 hours, but it feels like they're going in circles. When 0182 flatly admits he doesn't know where it is, Dante absolutely loses his mind, yelling, what? Then why didn't he say so? And asking if he's telling him they've been doing this for nothing, because this is ridiculous, and he's not taking another step. Dante lays flat on his back and demands 0182 can either carry him or get him something to eat if he wants to save his sweet potato. After a second, Dante notices 0182 isn't moving and calls out to him, asking what he's up to. Suddenly, 0182 just straight up collapses to the ground with a whip. Freaking out, Dante rushes over to the unconscious, drooling 0182, slapping his face and yelling, what's going on and what's the matter with him, yelling, no, he can't do this to him. Desperate and terrified, Dante shakes him violently, screaming, wake up and don't leave him alone, crying that he can't leave him alone in a place like this. So come on, you bastard, open your eyes, please. Out of nowhere, a loud whoosh cuts through the air as a figure in a cape drops from the sky, landing right behind Dante with a heavy thud. The guy who has spiky hair pokes a shocked Dante in the face and says, whoa, he's a normal person. Dante is completely bewildered, saying what? And the spiky-haired guy smiles and says, oh, sorry about that. He heard some loud shouting, so he thought he'd come and check it out. Just then, Dante's stomach lets out a massive growl. The scene skips to Dante ravenously devouring food from a pan in a small room, while the spiky-haired guy watches, telling him, slow down, he can take his time. There's more of it on the pan. Dante wipes his mouth and says, thank you. He saved him. And finally, some civilized folks.
An online forum post on the Babel Academy Refining Department Freeboard featuring a photo of a female student.
Dante introduces himself, saying, oh, his name is Dante Kang, and this is the first time he's met people who can actually hold a proper conversation, and he didn't know there were ladies here too.
The mood lightens up when the shopkeeper brings over their massive plates of food, making Nina's eyes sparkle at the sheer amount of grub. Kai is a bit confused, since large portions are technically meant for adults, but Nina blushes and admits she ordered the massive size purely because she wanted to eat the exact same meal as him. Kai finds it amusing.
Rambutan adds they're from the inner area, prompting Dante to ask the center. Rambutan clarifies they stop calling places towns or villages as you get to the center, and Dante asks, are there more civilized folk like them two in the center? Lychee laughs, ha ha ha, not necessarily, but the tofu village is notably full of bums because most of the ones here are outcasts. And by the way, asks if he's new here, and didn't he start using fog yet? Dante drops a bomb saying actually he's not a prisoner, which completely shocks Lychee. Dante elaborates he can't tell them all the details, but he's been kidnapped by that guy lying unconscious over there, pointing to 0182, passed out on the bunk bed. Rambutan's eyes widen, asking is he saying he was kidnapped into Fogland, and as Dante nods, both Lychee and Rambutan gasp. Oh, are you one of those teachers who got kidnapped? Lychee asks. Dante is stunned, asking what he knows about the incident, and how do you know about that? Rambutan explains everyone knows about it. The shoulders set up the whole thing, and they took over the line, so no one else could take the classes. Realizing the truth, Dante mutters, what is that? What happened? And what was the management thinking? Rambutan stares at Dante in awe, saying, wow, he can't believe he's actually looking at one of the targets, and he doesn't mean to be rude, but he is not a mole. Working for the shoulders, is he? Dante furiously denies it, saying him, a mole? No. So how did this happen? Lychee looks at 0182 and notes he doesn't think he's seen a shoulder who looks like him. Dante sighs, saying he only kidnapped him so he could learn how to grow a sweet potato. Rambutan basically does a spit take, laughing. Poof, no, he doesn't think he's a shoulder, and asks, are you serious? Are you sure he kidnapped you for sweet potatoes, not for fog? Dante awkwardly replies, oh, he's so sorry. It just had to be a sweet potato. Lychee and Rambutan start dying laughing as Dante thinks to himself, wow, they're actually laughing. And sure, the whole situation sounds like something straight out of a twisted comedy, and these two can relate and laugh at the irony like civilized folk. Lychee gently scolds Rambutan, saying, "Stop laughing. Can't he see he's crying?" Lychee clears his throat and asks, "So is he holding him captive?" Dante replies, "Not really, he's trying to make the most of him and use him as his bodyguard." But that's when he suddenly fell unconscious, and he doesn't know what happened. Maybe he had a heat stroke. Lychee corrects him, saying no, he's in limbo. And when Dante asks what that is, she explains, it's withdrawal symptom of sorts called fog withdrawal. She says he's seen the people sprawled on the streets. Right, they don't have fog. So they go into limbo, and eventually they will snap out of it. But if you experience limbo one too many times, it begins to melt your brain down. Dante, sitting at the table, asks the ultimate question, so what exactly is this fog? Lychee and Rambutan look at him like he's crazy. Before Lychee answers, "You really don't know anything about Fogland, do you?" He says, "Fog is the drug given by the god of talents, and it can awaken people's hidden talents or greatly boost a skill one has always yearned for." Dante is totally amazed, asking, "Is that even possible?" Rambutan stands up, flexing his insanely jacked arm and impossibly thick calves, and Lychee shows a bump on her head that boosts her brain power, declaring not only is it possible, but it also helps you break past human limits, and they're going to use their powers to break out of prison. Meanwhile, back in another part of the prison, a heavy door slams open. The ceiling fan creaks overhead as the hound sniffs the air like an absolute predator, realizing he didn't get far. Standing right behind him are the terrifying remaining shoulders of Sector O, including the Bone Eater, with a grotesque fleshy jaw, and the Faceless with glowing eyes, and the Fuzzy Back with crows resting on his massive hairy shoulders, and the Drill Head with a literal traffic cone for a head. The hound grins menacingly and states he is still in the Tofu Village. Rambutan tells Dante that they are going to use their powers to bust out of prison, which completely shocks Dante as he stammers out a question about them actually planning a prison break. Rambutan then straight up asks Dante if he wants to tag along with them, making Dante freak out and tell them to wait a minute because he's just an innocent civilian. Dante explains that he appreciates the offer, but he's planning to talk things out with the guards, or the administration first, because he knows that if he joins a bunch of inmates and breaks out, he'll actually get hard time for aiding an escape, adding that this is only if they even survive the breakout, since they could totally fail. Suddenly, the sound of brutal gunshots echoes from outside as people are getting blasted, making Rambutan bluntly tell a terrified Dante that he won't be seeing any guards, and he needs to forget about the administration or anyone else helping him. Rambutan lays down the harsh reality that no one from the outside is ever stepping foot in Fogland, because fog addiction is a real and terrifying thing, explaining that once you enter this place, you literally can't live without the fog ever again. And Rambutan drops the bombshell that the exact same thing goes for Dante, causing Dante to panic and ask why it's happening to him, since he never did the fog drug and never planned to. Rambutan shuts him down, saying his intentions don't matter, and asks how many days he's been stuck here, asking if Dante ever noticed the super thick mist hanging over the entire prison, revealing that the mist they've been breathing is basically just straight up fog particles. This makes Dante cover his mouth in pure horror, as Rambutan explains that fog is a drug from the god of talents that awakens hidden skills. And while it takes a massive amount of fog to awaken a talent, the tiny particles floating in the air are more than enough to get someone completely hooked. Explaining how the mist slowly seeps into your lungs and makes you crave more and more of it, Rambutan adds that if you can't afford to get your hands on actual fog, you end up crashing into limbo, making a hyperventilating Dante ask if that means he's already addicted and completely screwed. Rambutan tries to chill him out by saying he still has a fighting chance, explaining that the true addiction only locks in when you experience limbo for the very first time, adding that everyone has a different tolerance level, so it's impossible to tell how much time Dante has left before he snaps. He warns Dante that his time is definitely running out fast. Dante then turns the question on Lychee and Rambutan, asking if it's even safe for them to break out, to which Lychee sadly admits that they are already totally addicted and screwed. And Lychee mentions that they've literally never heard any stories of someone successfully leaving this hellhole, while Dante tries to cope by hoping researchers on the outside might invent an antidote once they hear about the symptoms. Lychee then smiles and says they promised each other they wouldn't die in Fogland, with Rambutan agreeing that even though they might end up in endless limbo and forget each other on the outside, they still want to be free and together under a real blue sky. As Dante watches them imagine getting married, he thinks to himself that they're super cringy, but they are dead serious about this. Suddenly, Dante screams after realizing that 0182 has just woken up from his limbo nap. Dante starts freaking out internally, wondering what 0182 will do if he finds out Dante is ditching him to break out with these two, worrying that 0182 might go crazy and attack or even kill his new friends. 0182 groggily asks if the sun is still up while Dante nervously stammers. Rambutan then asks Dante why he looks so terrified and points out that the guy he was worried about is just a weak fog zombie now, explaining that once someone hits limbo, they lose all their strength until their next fog hit, so even Dante could beat him up. Dante acts relieved, saying that's good to hear because he thought the guy might hurt Lychee and Rambutan. Rambutan casually mentions he could just kill the guy right now, but Dante quickly stops him, saying it isn't necessary. Dante then mans up and tells 0182 that he is getting out of there because he has zero intention of living in this prison, telling him they should just go their separate ways right now. 0182 looks confused and asks, what about their sweet potato plan? So Dante quickly snatches the sweet potato from him and grabs a cup to fill with water, handing it back to 0182 and saying that sweet potatoes will grow perfectly fine just sitting in a cup of water. Dante adds that it needs sunlight too, and tells 0182 to go outside and give his precious buddy some rays, completely ignoring 0182 when he says he doesn't know the way out. Dante then aggressively tells Rambutan to get moving before the sun sets, shouting back to 0182 that he can't help him with his plant anymore. Dante turns to his new crew and declares he's going with Rambutan and Lychee, and doesn't care if he gets shot full of holes or arrested for aiding an escape, leaving 0182 completely alone as the cup tips over and the sweet potato rolls onto the floor with a splash. 0182 just stares at it while remembering a conversation from his past where he asked someone what a puppy or a cat was, remembering how the person told him they were small, furry animals that understand words and run to you when you call them, and how he promised that one day when he got out, he would raise a puppy and call it to him. Snapping back to reality, 0182 stretches out to reach for his sweet potato. The scene shifts to an inmate using a ruler and measures something that moved 8 inches. The final scene cuts outside, showing a massive grotesque monster with multiple faces on its jaw, holding a crushed inmate in its hand, staring down 2 inmates who clearly failed their own breakout attempt. Dante looks super serious and asks what the plan is. Dante asks how they are getting out of there, and Rambutan, the spiky-haired dude, just smirks, telling him to let him demonstrate before crouching low to the ground. Dante watches in awe as Rambutan's massive leg muscles literally bulge out like crazy before he completely blasts off the floor. Rambutan screams as he rockets upward straight through the concrete ceiling, while Dante and Lychee, the teal-haired girl, look up in pure shock as the roof falls apart around them. Dante freaks out, asking what the hell that was, while Lychee calmly explains that Rambutan's special talent is his incredible jumping ability. Rambutan declares they are going to just jump right over the prison wall to escape. The trio is then seen walking across the prison rooftop, looking out over the massive foggy wasteland. Later on, they are back inside, crouching over a huge map as Lychee gets her pen ready and gets to work while Dante just watches. Lychee sketches out a ton of crazy details on the map, while Dante stares at it and says, wow. Dante realizes her talent lets her capture a scene and draw it perfectly like a photograph, and asks if she just drew the entire map of Fogland, but Lychee shuts that down, saying she only drew the path from the center to their current area and that it is just a super tiny part of the whole place. Dante is totally mind-blown that the massive map is just a small chunk of the prison, but Lychee points out that considering the size of the tofu village, they have actually covered a lot of ground. Rambutan gets hype, saying they might actually hit the edge of Fogland soon, while Dante takes the pen and draws stick figures on the map, telling Lychee she forgot something as he points out that she marked 4 vagrants right there on the map with some little stick figures. Lychee gets super annoyed and takes her pen back, yelling at Dante not to doodle on her map, while Dante defends himself, saying he was just pointing out the potential dangers she marked and asks what the red dot is supposed to be. Rambutan brushes it off, saying it doesn't matter since they are breaking out soon anyway, and asks which way they need to go, and Lychee points the way. Rambutan instantly grabs both Dante and Lychee, yelling that they are out of there before launching them all into the air. The scene shifts to a group of inmates looking defeated. Someone suddenly asks if any of them have fog. They look up to see 0182 with the paper bag mask strolling towards them, and the inmates mock him and ask who the loser is. 0182 threatens to check their pockets, making the inmates get super pissed off and call him a little punk. One of the inmates swings at 0182, asking if he has a problem. The guy starts beating up 0182, saying he picked the wrong day to mess with him because he is starving, and one inmate suggests that eating him is one way to cure his hunger. He whips out a spoon and says he is going to eat the guy because human flesh supposedly contains fog too, which is exactly why the Bone Eater eats people. The other inmates are absolutely terrified, saying they can wait and it will soon be lunchtime. But the other guy yells at his crew and calls them cowards, and that they need all the fog they can get. He points his spoon at 0182, asking where he should start eating from, while 0182 weakly begs him to wait. Out of nowhere, a massive foot swings down and kicks the spoon-wielding inmate perfectly in the face. The guy is sent flying back and hits the ground hard, coughing up blood and wondering what just happened. The kick was so brutal that his eardrum literally drops out of his head onto the floor, making the other inmates completely gross out as they look up in pure horror and realize that the Hound is standing right there. Total panic sets in as the inmates scramble and run away, screaming for their lives. The Hound towers over 0182 and says he finally found the paper bag head. We get a flashback where a bunch of loud gunshots starts blasting in the background. The Hound shatters a window with his bare hand and steps right through the broken glass, pulling an unconscious Dante up by the collar like it is nothing. The Hound looks out over the chaos and declares victory, saying the fools are too busy fighting the guards to even notice the teacher was gone. He gets super angry remembering how the tower used one of his crew members as a human bullet sponge, and declares their alliance is completely over as tears trickle from his eyes. The Hound then runs off carrying Dante under his arm, and 0182 chasing after him. He turns and asks 0182 which crew he belongs to, guessing by his look that he's with the Bone Eater or the Drill Head. 0182 pulls out a sweet potato and asks if a sweet potato is an animal, making the guy totally confused. 0182 then says if he doesn't know the answer, then they should go ask the teacher, wondering what kind of crazy talk this is. The Hound tells him he is super pissed off right now before winding up for a massive punch, yelling at 0182 not to piss him off. The Hound drops Dante and throws a crazy fast punch right at 0182's head, but 0182 swiftly dodges out of the way just in time. 0182 immediately counters by pulling out his sweet potato and delivering a brutal strike straight to the giant's stomach, making him drop to the floor in absolute agony. 0182 then grabs Dante and runs off while the Hound groans in pain. Back to the present, the Hound stands over 0182 and calls him a little thief, before aggressively trying to pull off 0182's mask and demanding to know how the teacher is doing. The Hound yanks his mask off and stares down at him. He sways groggily with drool hanging from his mouth, while 0182 asks the guy if he got any fog, making the Hound ask if he's in. The scene shifts to a memorial set up by the Hound's crew with a portrait reading R.I.P. for their former second-in-command, D. Some other gang member counts to 3 right before a sickening crack echoes through the grimy hideout. 0182 collapses to the floor while the guys trash-talk him for being a bastard. The crew violently tortures 0182 with one member threatening that he'll be eating with his toes if he doesn't reveal where the teacher is, but 0182 tells them to give him fog before he tells them where Dante is. The crew gets fed up with his stubbornness and decides to push his limits by planning to snap his toes since his fingers are already totally busted. The goon grabs the kid's leg and starts thrashing him around while the new second-in-command Slick and another huge tattooed dude watch from the sidelines, wondering if the kid even feels pain anymore. Slick tells Hound to just hand over the fog so they can stop wasting time while the goon gets ready to yank the kid's boot off. The kid is thrown upside down while Slick mocks Hound by asking if he is seriously intimidated by some scrawny little dude. Hound corrects him by pointing out that the kid's physique is actually insane and pushed to the absolute extreme with less than 5% body fat. The tattooed bro doing curls agrees the cuts are sick, but argues that 0 body fat just means getting hit hurts way more, though Hound reminds him that the kid literally registers 0 pain. Slick changes the subject to the real problem, which is the other gang bosses making moves because the whole block knows the teacher is hiding in the Tofu village and they are cooked if a rival gets him first. Slick complains that breaking their gang truce and taking out the tower was a massive mistake, but Hound fires back that it was justified since a brother got killed. Hound insists he deserved nothing less than blood revenge, while Slick basically tells him to quit acting like a loser so they can focus on collecting more fog. Hound slams his hand down in frustration and swears that D. would have wanted this. Snatching up the memorial beer, Hound declares that D. did not die for nothing. Hound promises that they are all going to ascend together to honor his sake. He tips his head back to chug the beer in a toast to D. while the rest of the crew solemnly agrees. Out of nowhere, Hound violently chokes and sprays the drink out of his mouth in a massive mist. The spit-up beer trickles down D.'s tribute drawing, while the rest of the guys freak out and ask what just happened. Hound clutches his chest and tells his bros to stop fussing because he just choked on the beer. But in his head, Hound realizes that during the scuffle, the white-haired kid expertly aimed right between his ribs, and his liver hasn't been right ever since. Super triggered by this realization, Hound hurls the crushed beer can directly at the kid's head. Crouching down, Hound tells the kid that his act might fool folks who fight like crap with fog powers, but he knows that strike was pure skill. Hound correctly guesses that the kid was using crazy elite practical skills, specifically a fighting style called Krav Maga. Hound taps the kid's heavy-duty boots as extra proof. He looks the kid dead in the eyes and asks if he is actually a soldier. The vibe switches outdoors where Rambutan, Lychee, and Dante are walking through a dusty prison compound. They spot a massive metal gate up ahead, and Dante notes it's the exit while Dante gets hyped, thinking it is their way out. Rambutan totally panics and violently yanks Dante back by his orange collar to stop him from running out into the open. Pointing up, Dante shows them a huge concrete watchtower looming right over the exit. Lychee starts freaking out, wondering if there are guards inside, and suggests they maybe part ways here. But Rambutan tells her not to be ridiculous. Lychee explains that walking up to knock on that door is basically a death sentence, and they shoot anyone who approaches. Suddenly, the whole squad freezes and looks completely shocked. A weird dirt-covered object shaped like a cone with crazy glowing eyes pushes its way out of the concrete and scares the absolute life out of them. Lychee asks out loud if it is a giant sweet potato, which instantly triggers the creature into screaming at her for disrespecting him. Dante suddenly recognizes him. Dante points at the thing, claiming he was in his class, while Rambutan shoves Dante behind him in full protective mode and warns the crew that the weird guy in the ground is actually one of the shoulders. Dante looks super confused after realizing that the guy in the ground is a shoulder too. Before they can process it, a whole squad of goons wearing orange traffic cones on their heads come sprinting down the road at them. The goons aggressively slam their cones into the pavement to surround the group. The main sweet potato guy bursts out of his dirt shell, looking absolutely cracked and ready to brawl. He flexes his title as Drillhead and brags about being the absolute closest dude to becoming the supreme leader. Drillhead reaches his hand out threateningly toward Dante, knowing he is the teacher they've been hunting. He orders Dante to come with him immediately. Rambutan refuses to let that slide and launches a totally savage flying kick directly into Drillhead's face, while screaming that the teacher is staying right where he is. Rambutan totally disrespects Drillhead by kicking him right in the face with a massive hit. Drillhead gets blasted back from the insane impact of the hit. Drillhead gives a super angry glare and tells Rambutan to back off, but the spiky-haired dude steps right up, asking who he is and claiming he found the teacher first. Drillhead gets incredibly salty that some stray mutt thinks he can just crawl in and give him attitude, so he decides to teach him to fear his superiors. The weird sweet potato-looking guy points his foot down like a literal dancer. He suddenly starts spinning around insanely fast like a human tornado. Dante watches in total shock and questions if the guy is actually doing ballet right before Drillhead leaps up and stomps down hard. Rambutan completely panics as he realizes the dude is coming crashing right down on him. Drillhead literally dives straight into the concrete and starts drilling right toward them using his massive head. He suddenly pops out right behind Dante and lets out a super creepy chuckle that completely terrifies him. Rambutan tries to hit back with a heavy stomp of his own, but Drillhead totally styles on him and calls him way too slow. Drillhead zips around so fast he becomes a blur, and Dante ends up screaming out loud as they get totally overwhelmed. Suddenly, Rambutan gets caught by a surprise attack from behind and is absolutely slammed into the ground, causing a massive rumble across the area. Seeing her boy get totally clapped, Lychee, the girl with the teal hair, screams out Rambutan's name, which instantly catches the attention of the surrounding bald inmates. The creepy goons pause because they swear they just heard a woman's voice and start tweaking out over it. They completely gang up on Lychee and rip at her orange jumpsuit, getting hyped when they confirm she really is a girl. Lychee screams at them to let her go while the goons ask their boss if they should snatch her up, as Dante watches in pure horror. Dante starts having a major panic attack, feeling like everything is his fault, so he stammers for them to stop before grabbing a heavy rock off the ground. The teacher chucks the rock and yells at the guys to knock it off. He absolutely clocks one of the goons right in the dome with a massive hit, which leaves everybody else completely shocked. He suddenly goes into straight-up rage mode and starts chucking mad stones everywhere, not sparing a single dude, and even Lychee ends up getting totally caught in the crossfire. Lychee yells at Dante to snap out of his freakout, and he asks her if she is okay before ordering him to just run for it. So, Dante and Rambutan instantly dash away from the scene as fast as their legs can carry them. The creepy bald dudes don't even chase them because they are too distracted talking about how pretty Lychee looks. Rambutan finally snaps awake, and Drillhead spots him right away, so the spiky-haired bro totally dashes forward and snatches up Lychee. But right at the exact same time, Drillhead swoops in and grabs Dante before instantly diving straight into the concrete and burrowing away like crazy, leaving Rambutan behind just absolutely screaming Dante's name. The story flashes back to Slick asking 0182 if he used to be a soldier or in the Special Forces. 0182 confirms that he used to be about the real fights too, until he was sent to Fogland. Then, the massive hound turns, walks away, and orders his second in command, Slick, to break 0182 down by using every dirty trick in the book, making absolutely sure not to give him even a drop of fog. Hound walks out and slams the heavy metal door shut. The other inmates ask Slick what his plan is, and if he wants someone else to take over his job. But Slick gets super defensive and starts trashing Hound by calling him an irresponsible bastard, telling his boys that Hound completely lacks what it takes to be a real leader, while another guy agrees, saying anyone can have a shot at ruling if they have enough fog. Slick starts hyping the other inmates up, saying guys with good drawing skills or crazy bulk could easily rule because they all have potential. They ask Slick about his own potential, and he points to his head with a smirk, saying his IQ has been shooting up a ton lately. Slick explains that every single morning he wakes up realizing just how totally foolish Hound is, which leaves the other guys completely shocked. Slick tells the crew that trying to rule with just pure muscle is super outdated, because they are now living in the age of brains where thinking is the real power. The crew asks Slick what the master plan is, and he smirks, saying he will find out exactly where the science teacher is hiding. Slick makes it absolutely known that he definitely is not sharing the teacher with Hound, and tells the rest of the guys they can make their own choice. He tells them they need to decide for themselves who they actually want to follow from now on. Slick then asks the starving and desperate 0182 if he wants the drug really badly. Slick holds out a massive glowing blue sphere of fog right in front of the guy's face. Slick agrees to give it to him, playing totally cool about it. The scene shifts to Drillhead, dragging Dante into his underground lair. He welcomes him to his underground kingdom, where he calls all the shots. The scene shifts again to Slick laying down the rules and demanding that 0182 works for him in exchange for the hit of fog, promising that if 0182 spills the beans on the teacher, they can talk, and the dude will never have to go without his fix ever again. Slick dangles the fog like bait and warns the wild guy to think carefully, because this is a one-time offer with no second chances. 0182 stares at the drug and audibly gulps like he is losing his mind. Instead of playing along, the dude just lunges forward and literally chomps right down on Slick's throat to get the fog inside his blood. Slick's crew watches in absolute shock as blood just splatters literally everywhere, leaving Slick totally gasping for air on the floor. The boys finally snap back to reality, freaking out and asking each other what the heck just happened and if the crazy dude seriously just ripped out Slick's throat, all while scrambling to help their dying bro. They look up in pure horror and see 0182 straight up chewing on the raw fog while giving them this insanely ominous glare. The scene cuts over to Dante trapped in Drillhead's underground lair, looking super defeated and deep in thought, wondering if Lychee and Rambutan actually managed to bust out of the prison without him, especially since he's feeling totally hopeless with the creepy sweet potato guy just staring him down. Drillhead suddenly breaks the dead silence by asking Dante straight up if the rumors are true and he can actually cook up fog. He tells the teacher about some wild street rumor he heard down in the Tofu village saying Dante made fog out of thin air and completely snapped the tower's neck. Dante is absolutely floored at how crazy twisted the prison gossip has gotten. He instantly tries to deny the whole thing, but then gets a flash PTSD moment remembering what happened when he told the tower he couldn't make the drug. The massive guy called him useless and literally tried to pack him up. So Dante totally pivots, changes his answer on the spot, and confidently tells Drillhead that yeah, it's all true. He starts cooking up this absolutely wild fake story about how the tower stood zero chance against him because he spawned a humongous chunk of fog out of nowhere, swallowed it whole, and instantly grew massive thighs the size of the Eiffel Tower. But before he can even finish his cap, Drillhead totally cuts him off and snaps at him to stop lying. Drillhead starts schooling him, letting him know he isn't a meathead like the other shoulders, and that he knows for a fact science teachers can't just magically create fog, because that's all straight up superstition. Dante tries to defend his logic by asking how the heck the fog even exists in the first place, if nobody is actually making it. Drillhead drops some major lore, telling him the fog was never made in a lab. It literally fell from the sky like a gift from God when a massive meteor crashed right into the middle of the desert 50 years ago. Dante's gears start turning as he wonders if that meteorite is the actual core source of all the fog. Drillhead keeps going, explaining that since it's been half a century, Word on the street is the fog supply is running super dry, and Judgment Day is basically right around the corner. Dante asks if the drug is just a limited resource then, and Drillhead nods, saying that's exactly why all the inmates are desperately scrambling and killing each other for whatever scraps are left. But then Drillhead reveals something totally insane, that the fog actually circulates in the body, and orders his goons to bring something inside, which turns out to be a dead body they just casually drop on the floor. Dante is completely horrified and stammers out, asking what the deal is. So Drillhead explains the guy died right after taking a massive hit of fog, and he wants to know if Dante can use science to separate the drug back out of the corpse's blood. Dante is just utterly disgusted by the whole twisted request. Drillhead suggests he should try pulling it off using that fancy 3D fuse machine thing, which makes Dante instantly correct him, asking if he actually means a centrifuge. Drillhead confirms that's exactly what he wants, for Dante to separate the pure fog components from the contaminated blood, since heavy users get the drug completely soaked deep into their systems. Dante heavily questions how insane this plan is, but Drillhead just stares him down and asks if it's scientifically sound. Desperate to avoid doing a blood extraction, Dante suggests a way easier option, just taking super deep breaths, since the addictive fog mist is literally floating everywhere in the prison air. Drillhead absolutely snaps at that, grabbing Dante right by the neck and aggressively asking if the teacher thinks this is some kind of joke. He yells right in Dante's face that you can't just collect random air. You have to somehow scrape it all together and actually condense it down to get a hit. This accidental slip drops an absolute light bulb moment for Dante, who immediately shouts out to Drillhead that yes, he totally knows how to condense the air. The scene violently cuts over to the Hound barging into his hideout, yelling out that it's officially time for breakfast. But he is hit with pure shock when he realizes his entire crew has been absolutely slaughtered and wiped off the map. He gets instantly filled with blinding rage and drops straight to his knees in total despair. We jump back over to 0182, who is casually walking to get some lunch, but rocking a crazy swollen left hand. He completely ignores the rules, jumping the queue and cutting right to the front of the line where the server calls him a punk and aggressively asks what the heck he wants. 0182 just deadpans and asks for water, but the server tells him to cut the absolute crap and get to the back of the line. All the other hungry inmates start backing the server up, asking if 0182 is blind to the line, calling him out for being a newbie, and questioning if he even knows how the chow hall works. Without saying a word, 0182 just raises that massive, swollen left hand and slams it down super hard on the counter, totally terrifying every single dude in the room before calmly repeating that he wants water. The scene cuts to show 0182's actual master plan. He just wanted to put his little sweet potato into a glass of water back in the room so it could grow. The narrative flips back to Dante, who is staring wide-eyed at his crazy science experiment, totally hyped that his insane idea actually worked. He hypes himself up, exclaiming out loud that he literally just created fog water. He totally starts stroking his own ego, bragging to himself about how he's an absolute genius, how his life is completely saved, and how absolutely nobody in the prison is ever going to mess with him again. But then the chapter ends with a brutal cut back to 0182 staring at his cup, finally realizing the teacher completely played him because his sweet potato isn't growing at all, and making a dark promise that he is absolutely going to kill Dante for it. The scene shifts to Rambutan, and Lychee try to pull a fast one on this completely clueless-looking inmate with pale skin, red cheeks, and a dark beard, who rocks a jumpsuit with 071 on his chest. Rambutan steps right up and asks the guy if he really wants to break out of prison with them. Rambutan plays along smoothly, saying they should get out of there together, and Lychee points down a dark tunnel, claiming they know a secret way out. The guy just deeps his hand in his chest and pulls out a dagger and tells them to cut the crap and get the hell out of his face. Lychee turns to Rambutan and admits that even the most clueless-looking inmates won't fall for this trick because everyone in the prison already knows about it. Rambutan realizes their luck is straight up garbage and points out that Dante is probably the absolute only guy in the whole facility who didn't know about the trap, while Lychee finishes his thought with this super sinister look, confirming that Drillhead's hideout is literally marked right on the map. The story then violently cuts straight back to Dante, who is breaking down the crazy mechanics of his new invention, explaining that a fog catcher is a device used in super dry, water-scarce countries to literally pull water droplets straight out of the air. He explains that the science is actually really simple, detailing how water vapor in the air condenses right at the dew point whenever the temperature drops. So when it gets cold at dawn, The moisture from the thick fog gets trapped in a mesh net and turns into actual water. He even notes that you can swap the mesh net for a basic breathable insect screen, and if you curve the shape, all the dew gets perfectly guided right into a collector. Dante wraps up his lesson by pointing out that the water they collect from the prison's mist will definitely hold a certain concentration of the fog drug. Dante stares at the massive basin full of glowing blue water and totally geeks out, yelling that the humidity down there is so insanely high that his device collected way more water than he ever expected, and he loudly realizes he basically just created raw fog water. Suddenly, Drillhead aggressively shoves Dante out of the way, staring wide-eyed at the basin and demanding to know what the hell he is looking at. Dante stammers nervously and explains that the water is made directly from the rich mist of Fogland, but he admits he isn't totally sure just how concentrated the fog inside it actually is. Drillhead just mutters to himself and quickly dabs a finger into the glowing water to taste it. His eyes absolutely light up as he realizes it tastes like fog, and he starts tweaking out, yelling that it is the real thing and that it's officially pure fog. The entire hideout instantly erupts into straight-up chaos as Drillhead's army of goons, who are all wearing these crazy traffic cones with eye holes cut out on their heads, start dancing around and cheering that they have successfully secured an infinite source of fog. The goons immediately switch up and start hyping Dante to the moon, screaming for the teacher. Dante gets completely caught off guard and yells out right before the massive crowd of goons violently grabs him and starts tossing him super high into the air in a crazy celebration while he just screams for his life. The crew actually hooks Dante up with a super clean professional outfit, and all the prisoners start clapping and cheering for him, hyping him up about how fresh he looks. Suddenly, Drillhead creeps up right behind him and asks if he is digging the custom tailoring, pointing out that it totally gives him that perfect, sharp, white-collar vibe. The sweet potato-looking boss gasses him up even more, telling Dante that absolutely nobody is going to mess with him from now on, because literally no one else in the prison is rocking a properly made shirt like that. Drillhead officially welcomes the teacher into his crew, promising to make absolutely sure Dante gets treated like straight-up royalty from here on out. Dante's gears start turning as he realizes Drillhead is actively claiming to be the #1 guy, closest to actually becoming the supreme leader. He gets a quick flashback to 0182, telling him that the absolute only way to bust out of this hellhole is to take the top spot. A sneaky smirk crosses Dante's face as he puts the pieces together, realizing he might actually be able to use Drillhead to safely contact the prison administrators and finally secure his ticket out of there. Drillhead stands tall over his crew and makes a massive announcement, telling the boys that they are going to hold the Grand Feast of Fog today because thanks to the teacher, they literally never have to save up their fog ever again. He drops the craziest news, declaring they are going to use up every single drop of fog they have collected so far just to fuel his own personal ascension. Dante is sitting there totally confused, questioning what the heck an ascension even means. Suddenly, the lights hit a humongous, glowing mountain of raw fog spheres, and some goon starts blasting a massive horn while a heavy, booming beat drops in the background. Dante stares at the insane pile of drugs and asks out loud if this is about to be some massive drug party and questions if that entire mountain is actually pure fog. Drillhead turns his back to the massive pile, spreads his arms, and dramatically hypes up his cone-headed brethren, calling himself the king of the underground. He tells his boys that this is the absolute culmination of all their hard work, and that by using every last piece of fog they have hoarded, he is going to attempt to ascend this very day. He screams at his crew, asking if they believe in his ascension, and the entire army of goons goes absolutely feral, throwing their fists in the air and screaming that they believe in him. Drillhead lets out this evil laugh, turns right to Dante, and tells the teacher to watch closely, because he is about to witness the birth of a true king. Without hesitating for a single second, the sweet potato-looking boss dives straight face first into the glowing mountain and just starts aggressively gobbling down ridiculous handfuls of the drug. His goons keep hyping him up, screaming yes and chanting for his ascension, while Dante just watches in pure horror, absolutely shocked that the boss is selfishly taking every single piece for himself. As Drillhead frantically eats, one of the goons yells out to ask if he feels any crazy changes yet, but the boss, whose belly is already getting huge, just yells back that he doesn't feel it yet. The goons keep desperately asking if there are any changes at all, until Drillhead suddenly yells for them to halt and lets out this heavy groan before violently trembling and flopping flat on his back against the floor. The goons immediately rush him, asking if he is all right, and Drillhead just lies there looking totally defeated, complaining that today just isn't the day, especially since he has eaten tons of fog in his life with absolutely zero results. One of his loyal boys tries to gas him up, saying it is just because his potential is way too vast and limitless, and reminds him he can always try again. since they literally have an endless supply now thanks to the teacher. Drillhead sighs and says it can't be helped, but then one of the goons suddenly screams for everyone to wait, pointing out that the boss's head literally looks way pointier than it did before. Drillhead feels his dome and his glowing eyes widen as he realizes the goon is totally right, and his head is insanely pointy now. The entire crew completely loses their minds, throwing their arms up and chanting that the ascension is finally happening. They eagerly ask their boss how it feels, and if he can feel a new talent awakening. Drillhead's eyes roll all the way back as his head stretches incredibly high into the air and his belly swells up into this massive, glowing blue planet. He mutters that he can literally feel the universe and claims he is standing right where the fog originally came from. His heart starts pounding insanely fast as he tells his boys he has been enlightened with all the truths of the world, making this super dark realization that they all live on a pale and blue piece of hell. Just as his belly bulges to its absolute breaking point, Drillhead violently detonates into a massive, blinding explosion of pure blue energy. The story drops this super dark truth that in this place you either ascend or you totally fall, while flashing over to the shredded inmate 0-182, casually holding up a piece of meat on a fork. Back in the hideout, the boss has been completely wiped off the map, leaving Dante standing there completely covered in glowing fog guts, while the goons start screaming that their boss has officially fallen. But instead of crying over the guy, the goons realize there is so much free fog raining down from the explosion. The narration notes that this is the exciting part, and that the real Feast of Fog only truly began right after the fall. The crazy cone-headed goons start scrambling all over the floor like starving animals, desperately scooping up the exploded glowing pieces of Drillhead and aggressively shoving them straight into their mouths while screaming about how it's a whole feast. But the hype gets cut super short because the goons who ate the tainted drug suddenly start blowing up one by one with massive pops. Dante watches the absolute massacre going down right in front of him and screams out in pure panic that all the inmates are literally exploding to death.